Good morning. Coming to you live on this, what day is it? Thursday. And yeah, wanted to come talk about something I've been thinking about, which is usually what inspires my wanting to make a video. But in even going through these last 6 weeks or so in my own levels, right? Just with you all and the various ways we're experiencing it, where we could just start to feel like it became more about survival, right? And getting us back to roots on that level, that maybe there's not even any room for a conversation about bliss or joy, and that whole approach almost could feel irrelevant or privileged or just not realistic, right, as a focus or a topic of conversation when we've been feeling so strained and stressed and worried about our survival, really, in various ways. So I find it's been interesting to let my inner conversation and my conversations with others become more about this, again, about this idea that there's a real value to following our bliss and to letting that be something that we can see as part of our guidance. I see some people here, but I can't see who it is. So hopefully if you want to say hi, give me a comment and I'll see it. But so is there any room for a conversation about following our bliss, especially during times like this? Meaning, is there room for such a conversation? Is that even relevant anymore? Is that a privileged conversation? And all of that may be true or good questions to ask, right? But for me, I'm finding, because part of my response to these times that have felt more challenging in various ways, even if it's just the awareness of so many people feeling challenged, right? Even if my personal experience has not been so bad or terrible, but just the awareness that so many people are strained or worried or struggling or even fighting for their lives, right, in various ways. So that awareness can feel so painful and almost stop us in our tracks. I've seen and witnessed with myself and being connected to you all, right, where we do get back to roots and making it just about survival, and you almost wonder if there's any room for bliss or joy or excitement even. And prior to this, I really was aligning with these ideas, especially as I want to be more spiritual, because that's been part of my response, is just wanting to be more rooted in my spiritual practices, my feelings of spiritual connection, the ways that I'm feeling that and doing that. And that's why I've been creating some of what I've been creating, like with my online Zoom retreats, is because I just want to get spiritual as fuck, like I'm calling that retreat series, because that just feels like the response I want to have. Because as I've been learning and growing my practices and my understandings of life and what feels true, and I'm really privileged that I was born into a family that I was given the freedom to decide these things for myself. So as I've continued to develop my feelings of spirituality and what I feel like is true, this whole idea of following our joy, following our bliss, we can start to see is a spiritual conversation. Because if we like to believe that there is a part of us, right, that is connected to that, whether we call it spirit or God or the universe, or just a part of us that we feel like is more who we really are, like our true self, our soul, our heart. And in those ways, maybe a part of us that we want to be living from more, right, and listening to more. And that could become part of like a spiritual lifestyle, is learning to become aware that we have that part of us, right, that's always even guiding us, that we could call more like spirit or God or the universe or our soul or our truth or just who we are. But if we have that going on in life, if we like to feel like we have that sense of connection, whether it's with ourselves and just our truth, our intuition, who we really are, who we've come to be, any of that, or if you feel like that's you and or your connection to source, spirit, God, the universe. But the reason that something like joy, bliss, things that we might think, how can we even think about those things at a time like this, where things might just feel so stressful and strained and hard and scary? So is there any room to talk about following your bliss? It's like, what the heck are you talking about almost, right? We almost like, is there any room for that? But if we see that and really get into the idea that what if that bliss, those feelings of joy, meaning just anything that gives you that, what if the reason those things give you that feeling is because they're connected to who you really are? They're part of that way that you feel connected to, right? Your heart, your soul, your truth. So this idea that following our joy, our bliss, even especially at a time like this, that almost sounds like a poem right there, or a rap. This is me freestyling. So, hi. Oh, I see some friends here, Chris and Kevin, or maybe it's Monique. But yeah, this idea of could we follow our joy? Could we follow our bliss, especially at a time like this? And I'm seeing that actually, especially if we want to be feeling spiritual in our approaches, in our lifestyles, in our ways that we're living, intuitive, right? And what do we think of like intuition is maybe our connection to that part of us that is God or is our truth or just who we really are, right? So if we feel like we want to be living like that, like living more tuned in spiritually to what we feel like is true for us, or whatever we call that, God or Jesus or spirit or Buddha or the universe, right? But if we feel like we want to be living more like that and from that, and then we can start to get the idea that the things that bring us joy, right, those feelings of joy and bliss, could be something that we can see as like guidance from those parts of us that could even lead us to more of that and those parts of us, right? So if we start to see that joy, that bliss, that excitement, I really like that word excitement, but that one's kind of a leap, even more so at this time, to think, could I be doing what feels exciting or most joyful at this time? And so then we might think at this time, oh, well, that feels frustrating, right? Because we have such limitation with the stay-home orders and or whatever is going on in our lives and our schedules. So we might think, well, I can't really do that, which really brings me joy. Like I can't follow my joy because that means things I can't do. So I like teachers that'll remind us that maybe that how this could play into like a moment-to-moment lifestyle, not even just like making big decisions based on our joy or our bliss, but actually more just like living in the moment to moment, tuned in a way that we could start to live like that, or we could feel into what feels more joyful to lean towards, right? In whatever's available to us at that time. So that's what's beautiful, is that we could start to get into the idea that whatever's available to us. So yeah, maybe right now we can't go do a lot of things. There's a lot of things we can't do, but within my current choices, and this is how I see that we bring this into like right now, if we want to start living more and get back to living more, like following our bliss, if that's how we want to call it, then it can come back into this like moment to moment living where within what's available to me, what feels like the more joyful choice, right? And what if starting to live more like that actually might lead us more towards feeling better, first of all, and feeling more connected, meaning feeling more connected to ourselves, because maybe the reason that thing feels more joyful is because it's part of like who we really are and part of what we're here to learn, and it maybe be part of our passion and our purpose, whatever that thing may be. And maybe the reason to follow that joy and that interest or that impulse toward what feels more joyful or blissful, whatever's available to us in the moment, the reason that could be a spiritual thing to do is because maybe those feelings of bliss or joy are coming from that spiritual part of you, coming from your heart, your soul, your truth, like a little bit of like a yes, that's the thing to do right now, right? Like, because yes, maybe that thing is really connected to who you are and what you love and what you're about. And the more that, I love that teachers I listen to will remind me of this, that the more that we even believe that we can move towards the things that feel like that, the more that we're going to even become more of who we are, right? Because it's leading us more and more to what we're excited about and what we're maybe personally here to do, if you feel like you have any sense of like mission when you come into the world, or that's evolving, right? So it's not that actually maybe now could be a really interesting time for a lot of us within our current choices, right? To get back to living even more like that, or to try that idea that we could trust and feel into what feels like the next choice. And some of us might feel like, well, then I may never do the things that I like have to do or don't want to do. And so maybe it does become about finding ways to flow through those things, because maybe that way that's painful is because we really do want to do those things, right? Even if we might have some resistance to them. So really, yeah, that too. And if we do, it is something that we wanted to do, like clean the kitchen floor, and we don't find ourselves feeling joyful about that, that maybe it's about how can we find a way to remember that it is something that we want to do, something in us. It feels like we'll feel joyful having it done, or whatever we can get to do to focus ourselves towards the joy in it, right? But yeah, just super interested in this idea of following our bliss in the moment as like a spiritual way of life, because trusting that joy, that bliss, that you could just ask almost yourself, and then you go do that activity and then pause after that. And I feel like that's where it's really interesting, if you really have a lot of freedom right now, but where you could even feel like bored, that what if, and maybe you're already finding yourself doing this, but the more that we could trust, like, okay, I'm going to flow through my day like that, and just as much as I can, and even knowing if there's certain things you want to get done, and finding a way to weave that in, right? But what if we could more just start to tune into, I'm realizing my sound is on, tune into what feels joyful, right, within our choices. And the reason to follow that being because that's like your guidance from within telling you that's a good choice for you right now, or that is going to get you more towards what you do want on the bigger picture. I like that idea too, that if you feel like maybe you have this like higher self, or this higher awareness, or this God above you, whatever you want to call it, that part of you might know like some of the bigger things that you really do want in life and what's important to you. And so the reason to listen to what feels joyful in this moment, even at a time like this, is because that's that part of you, that more God part of you, maybe spirit part of you, your heart, your soul, edging you towards something that is important to you, even on the bigger picture, even if you can't see how it is related, right? So sometimes that may mean, I feel like coming on Facebook, right? And part of you might be like, I don't know why I want to come on Facebook, but I just do, and learning to trust that, because then often, haven't you found, then it means you rendezvous with someone or a conversation that totally uplifts you or inspires you or makes you think about something, right? And then just to embrace it. What if that could be the lifestyle of tuning into that as like our guidance, those feelings of joy as like, yes, move towards that, yes, do that. And even maybe it might be take a nap, right? It might be take a walk. It might be call that friend. But yeah, I think that this is what goes with what we call a more intuitive lifestyle. And this is what's exciting to help foster in our kids. I'm definitely interested in that. Like, how can we help them live more like that? We could call it like being self-directed, like learning to be more self-directed, or getting back to being, or helping our kids stay self-directed instead of expecting them to want or let others direct them all day, right? so finding that self-direction, I see, is related to those feelings of joy, and that we can start to embrace that those are feelings that are coming from maybe that higher part of us, that God part of us that can see the bigger picture and is even guiding us towards, yes, that's the thing to do, because that's going to help you get closer towards what you do want, or who you are, who you're here to be. And that, yeah, and then also to imagine, if we're interested in mental health and just generally feeling better emotionally, much less having better days, right? That we can see how this would go with that too, right? And again, it doesn't have to mean like this hedonistic, irresponsible lifestyle, right? That it could mean about just more consciously tuning into how things feel for us, right? How we do feel. So it does involve that, and involving practices that help us feel into that for sure, which is part of what I'm definitely into also. But yeah, just this leap into trusting, experimenting with, trying out this idea that traditions, religions, philosophies over the years have talked about, this follow your bliss. And what if that's something we can do, and even is our best bet at a time like this, to even especially help us move through this the way we want to help us move into the future that is really, you know, like our best version, if we have any co-creative power here, which I feel like we do. So lots of good reasons to follow that bliss, and even especially because it's a spiritual thing to do. I can see now. Yes. And it says, and Morgan, thanks, Laura. He says, feels like important work to continue, learn to trust ourselves, allowing the less than blissful feelings. Yes, and I feel like that's so important, is the also allowing the feelings, because in order to get to the bliss, we have to also feel the hard feelings. So I'm so glad you bring that up, because it's so absolutely important and related. And I'm curious to keep feeling that out myself, because I certainly have learned how much letting myself feel the hard feelings has been important, and acknowledging those and working with those, and also having ways I get to shift and lift those. So that's part of it too. So maybe sometimes the joyful thing to do is to cry. So part of it has been letting myself cry more. I don't know how that feels like bliss, but it's part of it, certainly, to even do things like crying more, to move through the feelings, to even allow ourselves to feel what feels blissful, right? So yeah, I think that's such a deeper, even important conversation, like what might be in the way of us feeling our bliss, and what belief systems. I think there's also a lot of belief systems about why we wouldn't or couldn't live like that. But yeah, those harder feelings, I think, so important to feel. But I think they also do serve as a sense of guidance too, right? To not, I love the idea of the spiritual conversation on that, but I like is that if those feelings are guidance, that those harder feelings, darker feelings are important, and we want to feel them, but maybe we can also see that it is part of us talking to us about like how we're focusing, how we're processing it, and that maybe there is a more aligned way to be focusing and processing it. So I feel like it is guidance, but that's why we want to feel it, right? Because we wouldn't want to miss out on that guidance too. It's very interesting though, to not judge, because the judgment is obviously one of the problems here, and I'm still learning to not judge my judgment. So yeah, I think that's so important to bring in the conversation too, that feeling the harder feelings is like the other side of why just tuning into our feelings and believing that they're there to help us and even guide us. So yes, the higher good feelings as something to follow, especially towards creating a life that we might like and love, whether it's just in the moment, day to day, or in the future, but also that the harder feelings are equally important, and not to be turned off, shut down, not listened to, because they have just as much guidance, right? And I love that. I think, Morgan, you and I met through Kyle sees events, and that's where I really learned. Interestingly, that's where I really learned a lot more and got it finally more, and have just started to practice more, letting myself feel the harder feelings as part of being more blissful, or even being tuned into what feels blissful or exciting, and much less actually doing that more. So it's interesting how, yeah, it's not just about the good feelings. Good, that's where the judgment is perhaps limiting, right? So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'd love to talk to you more about that kind of thing, Morgan. And especially, yeah, with how we can play that into kids and parenting, because I believe that's some of the work that you're in, and I'm certainly interested in that, because yeah, this is part of the why too, to help our kids stay more tuned into that within themselves, help them understand their feelings more like that, and work with them like that, and honor them, and even have ways to express them. I find that for myself, allowing and finding in the blisses. Yes, challenging and good work. Yeah, right. And it definitely grows us to do the work of feeling the feelings, and just all the practices that help us do that. Like, I really see how my meditation of any sort, including things like journaling, are such a place that I do that, and so helpful. So part of it is the awareness, and then the feelings through the awareness, and allowing that, and then also allowing in the bliss awareness, we could say, and moving into more of that. So it's really cool how it all works together. So, well, I thank you, and I think I'll get ready to call it a close on that. And yeah, always edgy, or I'm more into sharing about these like spiritual thoughts I'm having and feeling, even though I've been into spirituality for a long time. But if you're here and you're interested, I'm super thankful to be in conversation with you, especially honoring that we all have our own truth, and we're all still figuring out what's true, and who really knows what's true, right? Yeah. And then if you are interested in more of this, I am doing these Saturday Zoom retreats that are really just free. I mean, if you want to do any donating on the side, you can, but just more about getting spiritual with sharing some of the people I like who are talking about such things. So anyways, good to be in touch with you, and hope you might even follow your bliss more today, as well as just honor how you are feeling, and if you need a nap, and if you need to cry, and that as part of the process, right, of even just like feeling our way through our day, and how that can work, and even be a spiritual thing to do, right, if that's what we're interested in. So thanks for listening, guys. Have a great day out there. Yeah, and if Morgan says if we learn this as teens, yeah, I'm definitely interested in how can we get this kind of stuff to the young people, so yeah, they don't have to do 20 years of undoing what we teach them otherwise in our other ways of being with them. So yeah, more to come on that for sure. We'll have to be in touch on that, Morgan. All right, guys, be well out there. Namaste.